Hi, this is Heather O'Connell again. I was just going to talk a little bit about the afterlife and the Odyssey. So here's someone's map that I found online where they tried to imagine all of the different places and actually map out Odysseus's journey. So you can see over here on the left, kind of off of the screen, is this must be where the land of the dead is. So I thought we'd look at today some of the features of Homer's afterlife in the Odyssey. Now, this semester we're going to read the Odyssey, and then we're going to read the Aeneid, and then we're going to read Dante's Inferno. So the one thing that all three of these epics have in common is, this afterlife. Each of these have a place where the hero, descends or goes to the land of the dead. So we're going to start with the Odyssey. So we'll use this as a way to kind of compare and contrast what we see in Virgil and then Dante's work. Okay, so one thing I wanted you to notice was the actual description of the place in Homer's Odyssey. So it's a little vague. I mean, we don't get a really detailed picture of what it must look like and feel like and smell like of the afterlife. We get a little bit at the beginning on page 347 in our book. It's the beginning of book 11. We get a little bit of description. So one thing we know from lines 13 through 15 is that Odysseus and his men got there by sailing to it. So they have to sail across the sea and probably, sail north a little bit. And I say north because, line 15, it talks about the men of winter. So it must be this place where, it's, out there in the water somewhere, across the water, and it must be cold. So that makes sense. If you look at this map of Greece, it makes sense why Homer would have put it someplace like this. So you have to imagine that the place you go after you die has to be a little bit different than the place you are when you're alive, right? So look at the Grecian islands. They're all surrounded by water. There's water everywhere. So it makes sense if you're going to go somewhere, and especially somewhere pretty, far away, like another life, then you're going to have to get there by boat. So that makes sense why they sail across the sea instead of like the traditional, Greek myth, Hades, which is actually under the ground. And that's what we're going to see in the other epics. But here, Homer just puts it across the water, which makes sense since they're sailing everywhere in the Odyssey. And they have the boats with them. So that makes sense. The other thing that makes sense is this idea that it's, the land of winter. So if you think about the Mediterranean climate and how mild and, warm it is, it would make sense that the afterlife, the place you are when you're dead, isn't going to be that nice. And so, the opposite of a nice warm climate would be somewhere cold, like the land of winter. I keep doing that. Sorry. The other thing I really want you to notice about the afterlife is that, here we don't see like a real system set up where some people are rewarded and some people are punished. It just seems like they're all just there. I mean, what's hard is that they're dead. They're no longer among the living, and they're no longer, among their family members and the people that they love. So it's not that they're really punished, it's just that they're shades. They're no longer themselves. They're just this dead version of themselves. But even though we don't see them being punished or rewarded, what we do get is this sense, especially from Achilles, that, the land of the dead is not the place you want to be. Where you want to be is alive. And, so this is something that Odysseus really has to think about, and, kind of take in as he's on his journey. Remember, he really wants fame and he wants, to make a name for himself. But, it's probably, if you listen to what Achilles says, then you might want to be a little bit careful about that too, because you don't want to just, for the sake of fame, end up dead. Because, like Achilles tells him, he'd rather just be, someone's unfamous laborer than be lord over the dead. The other thing that's important and that I want you to notice in the beginning of Book 11 is how Odysseus communicates with the dead, and the sort of the ritual he has to go through to be able to speak to the dead. So on lines 25 through 45, we get this description of the sacrifice he has to make. And, he puts out, some grain, some milk, and some honey, and then he, slashes a lamb and a ewe. So it's this blood sacrifice that he has to make. So this is, a nice sort of representation of what the ancient Greek, religion ceremonies would be like. So there's this idea that, human beings have not, have never really been 100% comfortable raising animals and taking care of them and then, killing them to eat them. It's something that we have to deal with. It's an ethical issue that we have to deal with. So one way that we're able to deal with that is through ceremony and through tradition. And so here, the sacrifice is made to something greater. So, that when there's a killing, it's not just for our own satisfaction and greed, but, to offer something to someone greater, like to the gods. So that's what we see here, the sacrifice being made. Blood is life. So the blood brings the shades to life enough so that Odysseus can actually speak with them. And then the other thing you have to pay attention to, and that's why I wanted you to do the assignment and the discussion board this week, is you have to pay attention to the people that Odysseus speaks to. He speaks to his mother, he speaks to his shipmate, he speaks to, his former allies, Agamemnon and Achilles. He speaks to Tiresias. That's the reason he journeys to the afterlife. So the people that he speaks to, his relationship to those people, and especially the conversations he has with those people, they are all very important. Please make sure you pay attention to that and read up on that so that you're prepared for the exam. That's what I'm going to, want you to know and be able to talk about on the exam. Okay, I hope this helps. I'm going to stop here for today.